Welcome to Brainstorm MTG. I'm ELD, and this is Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. We've got Grixis versus Dean playing Elves. Elves, a deck that is in the gauntlet here at the shop, available for people to use. If you PM me before the event, and Andrew, going to go ahead and throw it back. Yeah, Dean actually did not have his cards with him. Stopped by. Was not expecting to be able to make Wednesday Night Legacy, but his schedule luckily freed up, and we were able to help him out with Elves here. And Andrew's going to have a decision to make. Looks like both Natural Order and Glimpse of Nature to consider, along with a bunch of Elves. No mana Elves right now, though. We got Nettle Sentinel and Queer and Ranger, along with Elvish Visionary. Oh no, there's a Birchlore Ranger right at the front of the pack, so that actually is mana acceleration, and that's actually what he's going to take. Birchlore would accelerate out the plan, which is kind of the biggest threat from Elves, is their ability to accelerate almost like a vintage deck with Moxes. There's just so much extra mana kicking about. Brainstorm for Grixis. Elves has all of the traits of a blue deck without any of the blue cards. You've got card drawing, you've got library manipulation, you've got effects like, almost a Tinker in Natural Order. It really has all of the, the powerful things that you'd be looking for. And it feels a lot like a vintage deck. In fact, there are elf versions in vintage. They're just not particularly mainstream given the overall power level of the format. But a very solid potential hate deck. And we've got Liliana of the Last Hope, and that is absolutely brutal versus Elves. She is ticking up while murdering folks here. -2, -1 every turn for free. And this is taking a very bad turn here for Dean. Elvish Visionary adding to the board, but Liliana's not going to sweat that. And it looks like a fatal push. Liliana taking out Elvish Visionary. I believe we've got fatal push in hand. Just going to let it happen. Just leaving some glimmer of hope there for Dean as he continues to try and push forward. Ooh, this is not a great spot. Really, I think Dean may be in a situation where best case, clearing out Elvish Visionary in response to Green Sun for 1. A possible path to victory here is going to look something like end of turn, fetch out Dryad Arbor with that fetch land. I do think the Natural Order there, I'm sorry, the Fatal Push, perhaps an error being used on a 1/1. Here is Narset, and she's going to be able to search, and this Grixis list starting to turn into Super Friends. We'll see if this Dryad Arbor if this Windswept Heath fetches a Dryad Arbor. Liliana ticking up, shrinking the Nettle Sentinel, making it an ineffective attacker, but still stays on board. Here's Dryad Arbor. We're going to see Gaia's Cradle into Natural Order here. That is exactly it. Oh, and it is resolving. Craterhoof coming down. +2/+2 across the board. That can clear both Planeswalkers. Or it can go face for 11 damage. And he is going to go ahead and KO the Planeswalkers, leaving Andrew with just 3 mana. And Snapcaster Brainstorm, digging for some type of sweeper. Perhaps a Toxic Deluge, still 3 mana, missing a land drop after that Brainstorm. Oh, it is still tapped. There we go. I was like, why is he just attacking with Nettle Sentinel? It has not untapped during the untap step. Now we've got a Green Sun Zenith untapping it. A Nettle Sentinel being cast. 3 mana off of Cradle. Another Glimpse of Nature. 1 mana floating, Queer and Ranger. Really throwing those Glimpse of Natures out there pretty aggressively. A lot of the time they can be used for a nice little steady stream of card advantage. Llanowar Elf. Drawing 2 off of Llanowar Elf and passing the turn. And that's going to do it. Andrew packing it in here. Going to the sideboard. Looking for answers versus Elves. A lot of red blast and blue blast. There is no green blast. A couple of things can specifically screw with green creatures. Though creature removal, for the most part, good enough as it is without needing to get super narrow. Cards like Toxic Deluge, very capable. Marsh Casualties, another potential solid card. In other mana combinations, you do have effects like Zealous Persecution and Orzhov Pontiff. There's really no shortage of ways of giving -1/-1 to your opponent's side of the board, if not both sides. We'll see if Andrew has access to them. Marsh Casualties might be amongst the best right now. The fact that you can kick it is not totally irrelevant, but it is great to be able to have a trump to cards like True Name Nemesis in your 75. You do not want to be in a situation where that card resolves and you just auto-lose. The sideboard for the Elf deck, not exactly teched out right now. Could improve. Mostly discard effects and some graveyard hate. Not a whole lot going on there. Might have another natural order target, perhaps a Progenitus. This sideboard could definitely get polished up a bit. And Llanowar Elf, solid start here. For Elves, we'll see if Queer and Ranger comes down, or perhaps Gaia's Cradle to really accelerate out the game plan. And Andrew knows a good start. When he sees it, he's going to Fatal Push that Elf and try and slow things down. Fatal Push a quality enough card that he may actually want to use Snapcaster if he has it to get double duty out of that card. It feels bad a lot of the time when you're playing against Elves. You know, very often the deck is almost like a Storm deck where each of those Elves are just part of the combo. And you wouldn't feel great about countering every Dark Ritual that your opponent plays. That 1-for-1 drain is not really going to work out too well for you. But Elves sometimes drags you into that situation where you actually have to go after the individual Elves. And then that does potentially leave you vulnerable for the game-breaking spells like Natural Order, Green Sun Zenith, or even Glimpse of Nature. Blood Moon is in post board here for Andrew. Let's see how he fetches. He's going to go with some basics. Does he plan on casting this card? Doesn't look like he's going to be casting Blood Moon this game. Fetching out a pair of Underground Seas, Brainstorm. Putting that island underneath. And Hymn to Torok. Getting a couple of cards out of hand here. 2 Verdant Catacombs, it looks like. Always dangerous with Elves. 3 mana, untapping. Nettle Sentinel, just a solid beater right now. So in a bit of a train wreck game, Elves still representing a 3-turn clock, assuming that Nettle Sentinel can continue to be untapped. Grixis is going to need to do something about the situation. Can't just sit back. This is far from stable, and it looks like we may have that up front here. Snapcaster. And indeed, Fatal Push. Really shrinking things down. Interestingly, keeping the Elvish Visionary alive instead of the Nettle Sentinel. Nettle Sentinel, a little bit scarier because it's a 2/2 in some ways, but the real damage could be this card drawing off of Elvish Visionary, especially with this Wirewood Symbiote picking it up and putting it back down. Baleful Strix can be creature removal, but not in this situation. These Elves are going to be totally fine just staying on Dean's side of the board as he builds up toward lethal. Queer and Ranger. And Heritage Druid, all tapping for 3 mana. Two mana. Elvish Visionary picked up off of Symbiote and put back down. Llanowar Elf, and now 3 more mana. Another Wirewood Symbiote. 2 mana floating. And now 1 more time, so a ton of extra card advantage generated off of this Elvish Visionary, and I think now Andrew would like to take it back and kill the Visionary instead of that Nettle Sentinel, because things have gone horribly wrong, allowing Dean that extra card advantage. That Baleful Strix would have been a fine answer to Nettle Sentinel. The only kind of utility that he provided was a little bit of aggression during the attack step. But as it turns out, these Elves are just going to pile on some serious card advantage, even with Dean stuck on 1 land. 3 mana, 1 left, Elvish Visionary again. And he's going to be able to pick this up and put it back down repeatedly. Another Elvish Visionary. Gaia's Cradle would be a potentially lethal card right now, paired with Natural Order. Practically lethal when combined with Green Sun Zenith. Very, very close to being able to... Actually, he would be able to make that lethal, I believe, with the additional mana from the Elves. Uncounterable Elvish Visionary. Three more mana. I may have to make a playmat for Elves just to keep which Elves are sick, which ones have been activated, keep everything straight. Is one of the most complex decks to play in the format, which is weird because it's pretty straightforward. Like, it seems very straightforward to me. Like, most of the decisions are they're just number based. Like, it's pretty much just about efficiency. But there's a lot to keep up with. I have noticed that when some newer players have picked it up, I actually think it's a good deck for new players. I'm probably wrong. But they do seem to have an awful lot of fun jamming Natural Order on turn 2 or 3. But, you know, playing it perfectly does require a reasonable amount of skill. Dean with all the mana in the world here on just, looks like 1 land. I believe that Bayou got wastelanded. Three more mana. And Wirewood Symbiotes being put upside down now to denote their activation. That is fairly common for Elves players to do. Does get a little more complicated with Queer and Ranger when it's getting tapped. Elvish Visionary. You cannot tap Wirewood Symbiote for mana using Heritage Druid under normal conditions. It is an insect, not an elf. And now Birchlore Ranger. For a Thoughtseize. So Birchlore getting the off-color mana necessary for a Thoughtseize. Forest being cast. And Andrew going to extend the hand, more than 11 damage, going to swarm in around him after his draw step, realizing that was that, and going to go ahead and call it a day. Don't really love that decision. I'd always rather see making the opponent swing. But yeah, that's that. So perhaps that was actually Dean saying he was going to swing with everything without actually tapping him. That would be a totally reasonable time to scoop. But if you are in a situation where you get your draw step and it doesn't help you, and you do have a board like that, usually just make your opponent swing. If you do have a trick like Lightning Bolt or Fatal Push, that might be able to keep you alive. And that'll sometimes stop your opponent from swinging all out. They might not want to cash in all of their creatures. So, though with those Wirewood Symbiotes, I got to say, Dean was super far ahead. So, well done by Dean. And yeah, good to be back, guys. Be keeping an eye on the channel for daily content, hopefully moving forward.